Hello everyone. How do you know if something is right or wrong? Let's reset, let's start from scratch.
We'll see what models of reality are like. These are our best tools for interpreting the world. To explore uncharted territory, it's helpful to have a map, which is a model of the terrain you're walking on. This map is a tool that represents the territory itself. However, there are dangers if we get a faulty map, or one that's very old. Because it will lead us down erroneous, misleading paths that are inconsistent with the reality of the territory it represents. Of course, a map, like a sketch, helps us find paths, but it doesn't have to tell us where to go. As incredible as it may seem, this confusion is very common. Many end up walking where the map indicates, without caring much about the reality of the territory. But the model of the world, the map, the sketch, the model, are tools that exist for us to use. Life is an uncharted territory that we travel through. It is not an easy task. We must be careful in choosing maps or models of the world. The model of the world, or the map, is there to guide us, but it should not replace the lived experience of exploration, which is to understand the territory for ourselves. We must be careful with the map or model of the world that Das Man, the genius of the species, gives us, because it is the one that rules the collective. It gives us all the existential answers through revelation, because it tells us where we come from, where we will go, which paths to take, what we should do, etc. It keeps us in a state of interpretation when we accept the model of the world that is given to us, without having carried out the slightest exploration for ourselves, without even having reflected. This idea is in line with Heideggerian thought and also echoes of Foucault, Althusser, and even the Frankfurt School. In them, he expresses the idea that we are not the authors of our own words, thoughts, or interpretations, but that we are already inscribed in a pre-existing system of meaning that precedes and traverses us. Language, culture, and ideology speak to us before we can speak. They think us before we can think for ourselves. On a map of a large city, the interpreted state alludes to a structure where meaning is already given, where the complex megalopolis is not presented to us as a mystery or question, but as something already defined, labeled, domesticated. Thus, our experience is colonized by alien discourses, market values, and cultural stereotypes. We don't speak, we repeat. We don't think, we reproduce what others say. We don't explore, we follow. This condition is a great ontological danger. It prevents us from feeling wonder, doubt, and the authentic appropriation of being. We do not evolve. And if we do not know ourselves or evolve, we are not saved. Leaving this state of interpretation would, then, be an act of reappropriation of thought, a break with what has already been said, an exercise in ontological freedom. To dare to speak from within, to think from the fertile void of the unknown, to open a space where being can appear without being already interpreted by the other. To explore the territory and create our own model of the world, or at least, to verify the existing maps. If we don't choose, we don't exist. Therefore, not having a good map of reality is a serious ontological danger. Maps or models of reality are tools, and as such, we choose the best ones. And when are they most useful? When we get lost. If we don't know where we are, and furthermore, we don't know which way to go, then the map, the model, will help us. There are many types of models, depending on the region of the universe being explored. Models, sketches, and globes are models because they represent reality. There are models in other formats, such as the equations used in mathematics and physics, or chemical formulas. But there are other models, such as checklists, which tell us, for example, when a water sample is drinkable, or whether a person is sick or not, or whether a product is properly finished. Let's take a concrete example. The regulations that define water potability are a model, as they are a construct that simplifies and represents a complex reality to make it manageable and understandable. The map cuts out the territory, highlighting that water potability is established under certain parameters, pH levels, the presence of minerals, and the absence of bacteria, that model the reality of water based on health criteria. In both cases, a translation of concrete experience, the terrain, and the water is produced into an abstract framework that allows for decision-making, intervention, regulation, and prediction. It also helps us decide whether or not it is appropriate to ingest a certain type of water. Let's see. How do we know that this particular water sample is safe to drink? Fortunately, we have a standard that tells us when water is safe to drink and which should not be consumed. This standard is present in all countries, and in ours, it appeared in the official Gazette of the Federation. This standard defines water potability with a set of indicators, such as total coliform organisms, the presence of Escherichia coli, and turbidity. There are also limits for certain substances, which express what is tolerable, such as residual chlorine, total hardness, phenolic compounds, and many others. From a bacteriological perspective, the maximum tolerable level of aerobic mesophilic bacteria is also indicated. It is easy to see that by analyzing a water sample, we can easily determine if it is safe to drink. This example tells us that to verify if something is what it claims to be, it is necessary to have a standard, which in turn is a checklist. A list of the values of the indicators or attributes that something must have to be considered. This model, like all others, is designed with a goal in mind, a map to find the right path. This standard for evaluating water potability aims to maintain human health and well-being. Models exist based on a goal. They help us avoid getting lost, to know if something is what it is supposed to be, like regulations. They also serve to determine whether something is right or wrong, or good or bad. In this case, the model would function as a kind of ethical map that guides us through the complexity of our everyday decisions and judgments. Just as a map selects certain elements of the territory and excludes others to guide us along a path, moral models draw lines of meaning through human experience. They classify actions within the coordinates of what is permitted, prohibited, desirable, or condemnable. When we use a moral model uncritically, we run the risk of falling into a form of inauthenticity, very similar to Heidegger's Das Man, where right or wrong is not decided by personal reflection, but by what is said to be correct. Living ethically, then, does not consist only of following the model, but also of examining it, questioning its origin, its limits, and most importantly, its purpose. We will give another example to better illustrate this type of issue. Let us ask, how do we know that a person is healthy or sick? The answer is simple, because there is also a norm, similar in every country in the world. The norm tells us if a being in the human collective is sick when it does not fall within the parameters or indicators of health. What is health according to the World Health Organization? It is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or illness. The standard uses certain indicators to determine whether a person is healthy or ill. What is a glucose level? A result of 140 mg per deciliter or less is considered healthy. The resting heart rate in adults should be between 60 to 100 beats per minute. The body temperature should be between 36.5 and 37 degrees Celsius. The blood potassium concentration should be between 3.5 and 5.0 milligrams per liter. This way, we compare all the indicators and determine whether a particular person is ill or not. The objective of this standard is to maintain human health and well-being by functioning within healthy parameters. Why was this particular health objective chosen? Well, it seems there's an agreement among the vast majority of human beings that the primary goal is well-being and health. At this point, we can connect what is right and wrong. According to the above, it's right to exercise, not smoke, and not overindulge in carbohydrates to maintain health. Of course, based on achieving health and well-being goals. But if someone claims their goal is to be sick, not stay healthy, then they can say it's right to smoke, overeat, and not exercise. Then, depending on the goal, the act of overeating and smoking would be right or wrong. So, goals in the human collective determine the type of norm. And these, in nature, are not forced. Goals are imposed by the genius of the species. The goal is not necessary. That is, it's not forced, as would be the law of gravity, which affects everyone, even if we don't want to obey it. The goal is often a choice we make in a society where several life goals have already been defined in advance. But goals are essentially a choice. One chooses to live sick, another chooses to live healthy. One chooses to be saved, another chooses not to be saved at the end of death. Is it right for a chair to have 4 legs? If the norm among the covenant of men states in its normativity that it must have 4 legs, then it is completely right for it to have 4 legs and not 3. Therefore, the goal, since it is not necessary, is something chosen out of choice. We have disciplines that guide us, such as ethics, aesthetics, and logic. Ethics, aesthetics, and logic are structured around their own value systems. In the field of ethics, fundamental values are the good and the right that guide our actions and moral judgments. Aesthetics, for its part, moves between the beautiful and the unbeautiful. Logic, finally, is governed by the distinction between true and false, establishing the criteria that allow for coherent thinking. Each of these disciplines, in its own way, offers a framework for interpreting and evaluating different aspects of reality. The difference between these values is that mathematical and logical truths are objective values valid and necessary for all living beings, no matter what world they live in. While ethics and aesthetics are subjective values, because what looks good in France doesn't look good in China. And since many objectives are chosen based on taste without being necessary, we can assert that ethics is merely an aesthetic. Good and bad ultimately depend only on the objective and the standard. It depends on taste, so when we evaluate, we do so following a standard that was generated by an objective. Interestingly, if ethical objectives were chosen based on taste, then ethics would be a branch of aesthetics. We evaluate whether water is drinkable, whether a person is healthy, whether it's okay for a chair to have 4 legs. The standard, at the end of the day, gives us an image of reality, of what it should be. A model that represents reality.
The objective is necessary, and the ultimate nature of the objective is aesthetic. Thank you for your attention.